the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am missing my usual co-host today, but I have an amazing co-host that's stepping in for him, Miss Jennie Karnish.
Hi, my name is Jennie Karnish. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor.
LPCC.
LPCC.
Awesome. And how long have you been how long have you been a therapist? How long have you been in your role?
I have been a therapist since 2015 is when I got, I think, yes, yes. I did in-home work prior to while I was going to school to be a therapist, so it kind of blends in together. And then I am currently a clinical territory director for Ellie Franchising, and I've been in that role for a year now.
And you still see clients?
I do still see clients.
You were gracious enough to move one of your clients today.
I was. It worked out well.
Well, good. Awesome. And Jennie and I immediately bonded when I started at Ellie because I was coming from the child protection world, and you also worked in child protection for several years.
Yep. So when I was doing in-home and then community mental health, it was primarily surrounding foster care and kiddos and families and services.
Awesome. And you also have a ton of experience with complex family systems.
Yep. So I did oversee Ellie's complex family systems program for a while, and working with court-ordered families that needed to do co-parenting therapy or court-ordered reunification therapy or just court-ordered services altogether. I am trained in juvenile sexual offending therapy as well. And so I've become very accustomed to working with folks on probation and kiddos on probation as well. And so just navigating the court system within the therapy lens.
I did not know that. That's so interesting. And today we have a guest. We have Sara. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sara Livingston-Burke. I am a LPCC, so licensed professional clinical counselor, and I've been at Ellie since 2018, so 5 years, and I oversee the CBS program, so the community-based program. I am the director of clinical programs for CBS. I always forget my title because I'm like, oh, it's a title. It is what it is. And so what I do is I oversee ARMS, CTSS, in-home therapy, check on the directors, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to, check on the practitioners, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to, and I have my own clinical caseload. So
Awesome.
I do see clients, and I love working with my clients, of course. I have a variety of clients aging from like 15 to over 70. So it just kind of depends on what's needed. I typically work with the SPMI population. And so I have a variety of clients that I really like working with.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So as we are filming this, it's kind of cool because it's Infertility Awareness Week while we're filming this. But then when this releases, it will be Maternal Mental Health Month. And so we wanted to have a couple of episodes where we're talking about maternal and paternal mental health. And I think that it's hard to talk about this topic without talking about infertility and talking about the impact of infertility on someone's mental health. And so Sara and I have had so many good conversations about infertility, and so I was so excited to bring you on. Yes. And then Jennie and I have not really ever talked about infertility, but apparently you have so much experience working with clients in this population and some yourself, and so I'm excited to have you on as well.
All the layers.
And that's a good point where it's like there are so many layers to this topic.
Oh, yeah.
There are. Yep. There are. And it impedes a lot of, people speaking out, especially those in the helping profession. Yeah. And so if you are, let's say, a therapist going through your own infertility treatments or just the process of it, and then navigating that with clients that are either expecting or running through their own infertility issues or whatever it is, like it stirs up some personal things. And it is a really important topic because it brings up so much of your own stuff that you have to deal with, so it doesn't interfere with your work with your clients.
Absolutely. So in this episode, we're hoping to cover that and also talk a lot about how therapists, whether you have dealt with infertility or not, can be supporting clients that are struggling with infertility. And then I think this additional layer of supporting family members or loved ones that are struggling with infertility. And so why don't we just start at kind of the foundation and start talking about the impact of infertility on someone's mental health?
Oh, yes. So as a therapist that struggles with infertility, I'm currently on my own infertility journey. And, hopefully soon, right? We always have that hope. The impact on the mental health is there's so many layers to it, as you said before, because it's not just the waiting and the wondering and the feeling of hopelessness when you take a pregnancy test or you do get your period or your partner gets their period. It's also, there's financial aspects to it because IVF is incredibly expensive. It ranges from like 10 to 20,000. And if you didn't know, IVF doesn't always guarantee you a child, right? You might have to go through multiple rounds, and those rounds are the same cost each and every time.
And often not covered by insurance.
Not covered by insurance for the most part. Yep. So there's also that financial stress layer.
Yeah.
There's that, I have to hide, it's an invisible illness layer too. So people put on brave masks every day, and they're just trying to kind of figure out, like, how do I walk through my day? How do I do this? And I think a big fear that they come to is like, oh my goodness, are people going to ask about that? Are they going to notice that I'm X, Y, and Z? Like, I'm feeling very sad. And so you have to kind of like understand, when it comes to mental health, that people, they might be going through like a depressive phase. So like, when you think about it, for fertility, there's 2 weeks where you'll get your period, and then you'll have the week after that you're just kind of like, all right, this is my in-between week. And so during those 2 weeks, if I fill out a PHQ-9, my symptoms are going to be super high, right? But then I have my ovulation week, and I have the 2-week wait for that. And if I fill that out now, I'm going to put not at all for all of those because I'm like, it's going to be this time. Yeah. It's going to happen. Yeah. And so understanding that it's such a fluctuation throughout the month even.
Well, and gosh, if you are on fertility treatments, or if you're on, I have a good friend of mine that was just on all of these different hormonal treatments and just how that affects your body. And oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. You can, like, it feels like you're turning into a nightmare to everybody around you. I remember they put me on this medication that helps you get your period. And I was like crying every day. And my husband's just like, I don't know what to do. Oh, no. And like one minute I would cry. And then the next minute I'd be like, let's watch a Disney movie. It's going to be great. And he's like, what do I, do I get you chocolate? What do I like?
How do I support you? What do I do?
Exactly. So trying to navigate through that. Yeah.
Well, and that can be so hard on your relationship, right? Yes. Because the expectation is, I need you. I need you to show up. Exactly what I need. Don't ask me what I need because I don't have a clue what I need in this moment, but I expect you to show up, right? And so that almost sets up, like, the relationship element can be in conflict, even though it is, you're both hurting, you both want something very badly, right? And then you have these hormones that you're not in control of. And well, it just gets to be so much. And so when you talk about the mental health that goes with it, it's also all the things that you just described, Sarah, but then add on the social pressures, the people that ask, are you going to have kids of your own? Right? And it's like, you have no idea what someone's going through. And there's been a lot of growth in that department, especially around like sensitivity. However, it's still a question that gets asked.
Well, and I mean, while you were talking, Sarah, I was just thinking about how similar the stigma with infertility is and can be with just mental health issues in general, and how it is this invisible illness. It's not something that you really, people can't see it, like and so it's hard to to know when to share, who to share this with. And and then even just on the relational aspect, I think of in Friends when Monica and Chandler are trying to get pregnant, and how like there is so much pressure between them and like timing things. I mean, that can be really hard. But then even just thinking about, especially if the infertility is, your partner, and wanting to not have like blame or guilt or, some of that frustrations, but, and then even compounded when there aren't answers. Yes. I think that ambiguous loss is something that can be, so hard for partners to
and it really goes back to every month that you don't find yourself pregnant, that you get your period, that you have a negative pregnancy test. Yeah. Those are the months that, month after month after month, it starts to wear on you like there's something wrong with you, right? That you are broken, or there's something like, why can't my body do what my body was designed to do, right? Or is supposed to naturally have happen. Oh, yeah. Right? And so then there's this grappling of shame that goes with infertility. And that can be really, really hard for some folks, especially if they don't have a partner or a support group that is, in tune with that element of, like, it's a loss every time. It's an ambiguous loss, like you said, Miranda, but it's also like a loss of what could be.
Yes. Yeah, the future. Yep. Definitely. And it's also a trauma at the same time, too.
Yes.
It's experiencing trauma every single month. And when we do that, obviously it does create that whole trauma bubble that you're living in constantly. It's a re-traumatization, and it's really painful. And you just sit there and you're just like, well, is this the month? It's not the month. Okay. Well, what do we need to do? What do we need to change? And it's like that problem solving mode you go into where it becomes just a really big challenge to sit there and go, okay, what else can we do? What else are we going to face here? And then, some people end up having nightmares about it. There's a full PTSD mode that does go into it. So it can be really traumatic for people too.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, let's start kind of from a perspective of a therapist struggling with this. How do you show up for your clients? Maybe clients who are also dealing with this, but then also clients who are pregnant, people who, just before we started recording, do you want to share the story that you were just talking about with the...
Yeah, I can.
That's a good example.
Back when I was doing in-home work, so I should backtrack a little bit and say that our oldest daughter is adopted, and that her adoption was determined, or we were determined that we were going to adopt from the time we were dating, right? That was a conversation like, so I'm going to adopt a child. If you are in for that, great. Like, happy to keep this going. If not, bye. Yeah. Right? So her adoption is not a direct, response of infertility, right? It was more of a just didn't know what order we were going to do things in. So for a while there, when we were initially trying, I was doing in-home work, and one of my teenage clients that unfortunately had a really rough home life found out she was pregnant, right? And that was a big, punch in my gut, and I had feelings that range from, anger and jealousy and sadness and happy for her, right? All at the same time. And it, there were some thoughts that creeped in my head of why the heck is she pregnant and I can't be, right? Just these
normal,
very normal,
very normal, right? But it makes you feel like a terrible person having those thoughts at the same time, right? And I would be such a better parent than she would be. It got to the point that I was like, listen, I have to check myself. Yeah. And I need to readjust my thought process if I'm going to be able to work with this client ongoing. Yeah. And thankfully, we were able to maintain that relationship and get to a place where we were able to just forge along with our relationship.
Oh, yeah.
But it took a lot of my own work, right? And I couldn't pretend that it was okay.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a great point of you have to know where you are in your journey. Like I personally know that right now, I would not be able to see clients that are experiencing infertility issues just because of the fact that I would have like a really quick response and just be like, okay, this is something I can't do. I don't want to put my stuff on you. Like that would be such a big thing. And so knowing where you're at in your journey with infertility, or as you do get pregnant, it's okay, can I see people? Is this something I feel comfortable with? Am I going to have that response where I do have the very normal response of anger or frustration or whatnot? And will I be that person that takes it out, or will I be able to take a step back and go, I need to refer this, like, let's refer this person out, or can I deal with my own stuff while I am seeing this client? Is that okay?
Well, and in those different scenarios, I usually would recommend, utilize supervision, be talking to your supervisor, but with this particular topic, it can be hard to talk to people outside of, I don't know, was that an option for you?
It is really hard to seek supervision on this if the supervisor hasn't been in those shoes.
Yes.
Right? Because you can talk through ethical things and you can look at this objectively in the sense of, well, clearly you need to refer out because you have too much of a connection to it. And that's not maybe always what's in the best interest of the client, right?
Right.
Sometimes it can be both beneficial for yourself and the client to go in this journey together with appropriate boundaries of staying in your lane. I've worked with clients that have been going through infertility, and then I had to tell them I was pregnant, right? And that flip side is really hard too, because you know how hard that is. You know the sensitivity that goes around that. And it's not to say that I, wasn't happy or wasn't thrilled to be in that position, but I also could empathize and feel for them because I've been in those shoes too. And so I've been on both sides, and I would say it's hard.
Well, how did you approach that conversation then? Did you call it out? Did you acknowledge it? Or did you, I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking through.
So I've experienced it both ways of being in person with folks while being pregnant and then being virtual with folks while pregnant. And virtual was a lot harder just because they couldn't physically see the changes. And one of my second pregnancy, I had a itty bitty baby, and so I barely looked pregnant. And so that was also kind of a conversation too of, well, you don't really look like you're gonna have a baby. And I'm like, I don't disagree with you, but
well,
indeed
thank you.
is. And so it's a hard conversation to navigate, and the client deserves that respect, though, of being communicated in the same way I would communicate with any other client. And it's, hey, I have something I need to talk to you about, and forging through it and allowing space for them to have their feels about it.
Yeah.
Because they might be experiencing that anger. Why is this?
Absolutely.
Just like you described too. So just kind of honoring that space for them and holding it and just being like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Where do we, do you want to take a week, come back? How would you like to do this? So
yeah, absolutely.
that makes sense.
And talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And so like not expecting them to be like, so happy for you and moving on with the day. Like, it's okay if you're mad. It's okay if in turn that comes out on me. Like, I get that. That is okay. And just holding space for them to have their feelings about it and not taking it personally.
Oh, yeah.
So how would you both recommend people be caring for themselves while struggling with infertility, going through this, we talked about kind of being able to have some self-awareness and reflection, but what other recommendations would you guys have?
I recommend getting your own therapist. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say it loud. I'm going to say it proud. I have to say that having my own therapist throughout this whole journey has been absolutely amazing. And being able to be like, I just need to get this off my chest. I just need to talk about this. And very just, she's absolutely validating. So I just adore her. But I think it's so important for, as a therapist, to have your own therapist when it comes to some really hard stuff that might affect your work.
Yeah, and I definitely echo that. I think support groups, especially online ones, have their time and place, but it is to be noted that sometimes those can take a turn for the negative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And people are pretty quick to express their frustrations, and that can really harm your mental health too.
Yeah.
Especially when you see negative, that starts to be the approach that you adopt just by proxy.
Oh, yeah.
And so while support groups have their time and place, just being very mindful of what you are getting out of a support group versus what is occurring within the support group, you might have to reevaluate if this is the right one for you or not.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about connecting with others that have either gone through the same thing, are going through the same thing, and can just relate on a way that others can't.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then also knowing who in your group that you'd like to talk to about that. Who do you think has space or the ability to say, hey, I just need you to listen. I just need some support. And this is something that we're going through. And I would just really like to talk to you about that. And making sure that you have to understand that maybe they don't have space. But also, ensuring that you feel comfortable with the person too.
Yep.
Out of curiosity, and I'm just curious, how did you two, or who did you two share with in your own personal experiences?
I would say initially, I think people knew that, we were thinking of expanding our family and going to start trying. I think I would say maybe some closer friends as far as just the added medication that I was going to go on for hormonal reasons to try to balance things out. But then I would say it wasn't until I had my initial miscarriage that then I started to tell people that it happened, right? And that was met with some very interesting responses of, people being very supportive. I've heard lots of people say oh my gosh, I went through that too, or I know somebody. It's kind of like someone has a connection with it just because it's so common. But then also having, responses of, well, I hear it happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so while that's not necessarily helpful of a response, it is a fairly common response, right? And it is something that does happen far more than what people are expressing.
Oh, yeah.
And so that statement as a standalone isn't untrue, right? It does happen fairly often. It's just, it's not communicated about until it is.
Yeah.
And so I would say mine was my close family and friends, and then not really too many people. I think people at work knew.
Yeah.
But I was not really vocal about it.
Yeah. So originally it was just my husband and I, right? Obviously we knew. And then I expanded to my mom. I tell my mom everything. So,
Shout out Sarah's mom.
Hey, Mom. So I told my mom, and then we told my mother-in-law. My husband is like, I want to keep this private. Let's keep it. And I'm like, I want to tell the world this is awareness. We got to figure it out. And he's just like, that's not where he's at. Right. And so I did tell close friends. Some coworkers obviously knew because they were like, "You're changing. What is?" And that's part of the whole infertility thing is they notice like I'm getting quiet, or I'm not hanging out, or I'm not doing X, Y, and Z things, and they're like, "Something's going on. What's happening?" And that's when we really started going into the testing portion of it, and I'm finding out all these numbers and what they're telling me, and then I was just like, you know what, I'm okay with telling people that's my journey. I'm okay with it. But I do only talk to specific people about that. Yeah. I remember opening up to somebody, not at in my personal life, and the person's like, yeah, I just don't talk about my uterus in public. And I was like, okay, that's what we're going to do. We don't need to chat about it anymore.
But that's kind of like an unfortunate thing, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for that person especially.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you aren't comfortable talking about your uterus in public, I mean, I guess that is, you can stay in that lane. But there should be no shame about talking about your uterus in public.
Like, this is awareness. This is the important part of it. And,
Yes.
and Jennie, just like your experience, I found out so many people, like so many people in my life and so many people around me have had infertility experience.
Yep.
And they're like, I don't know who would I talk to about that? And you find out about people that have had miscarriages and had to do IVF or had to take certain things. And you're just like, I never knew that.
Right.
Like, you have health, like your children are healthy, they're blah blah blah, and there's just like, we just didn't talk about it. And so I think that that's such a struggle. So I do agree, support groups are great, but do identify the ones that feel good to you too.
Yeah, and if you are someone that gets invited into someone's journey with them,
Yes.
be mindful of what a sacred space that is.
Yeah.
Right? And that when you share these things with someone, it doesn't come from just flippantly opening your mouth and sharing them. It comes from like the deepest parts of your soul.
Yeah.
Right? And so honoring that the person sharing these things with you is allowing you into like some of the deepest, darkest like times.
Oh, yeah.
And acknowledging that, you like, that's an honor to be invited into that space, and holding it with those special gloves of just, I'm going to come around and protect that information.
Yeah.
That's a really perfect segue into one of the other things I wanted to kind of discuss is like helpful and unhelpful things that people have said to you, could say to you, things. I mean, the uterus thing is a perfect example of that.
Perfect example, yes. I think my mind's like going straight to the unhelpful ones, but I want to say a couple helpful ones first. I think just validating, Jennie, as you were saying, validating, allowing that space and understanding that this is a really hard journey for them, and it takes a lot out of the person. There's testing. They're constantly being poked with needles. They find their legs in stirrups a lot. Like, it's very uncomfortable.
Invasive.
Very invasive.
You are very exposed.
Very exposed all the time. And so when somebody does allow you into their journey, making sure that you believe them, you validate them, and, just checking in on them, like sending a text message of, hey, I know you're probably not wanting to hang out, but I just want to let you know if you want to do lunch, great. Or I just want you to know I'm here.
Yep.
I think people tend to not understand that people with fertility issues do tend to isolate themselves. It's very similar to depression, grief, grief and loss. And so just sending out that message and just being like, I'm here for you. If you need anything, anything like that. Maybe if they're going through a treatment, making a dinner for them and just leaving it on the porch and just being like, hey, just thought of you. I know that today's the day. I just want to bring you something to enjoy. When I think of support, there's a lot of things Sex and the City got wrong. I'm going to say that first, but there's something that they got right is an episode, where, Miranda finds out she's pregnant, right? And Charlotte comes in and she's been trying for 5 months, and she comes in into brunch and slams the tampons on the table, and she's like, we've been trying, and they talk about how she's been trying, and Miranda's like and Miranda and Carrie are both frozen and like not knowing what to say or not knowing what to do. And then, they drop the news, right? And Charlotte has that anger reaction. She's like, don't you understand? I've been trying like everything. And then later in the episode, what happens is Charlotte finds out that she has a 15% chance of getting pregnant. And she bumps into Miranda and she turns around and she doesn't want anything to do with her. And then Miranda's like, excuse me. And they stop on the street and they have this whole like bout out where Charlotte shouts at her and she goes like, 15%, right? And the support portion that I love was Miranda goes, do you want me to walk with you? And she goes, no, I would rather be alone. And she goes, I will walk right behind you then the entire way home. Yes, it's beautiful. And I love how they did that. And that's exactly what she did, was followed her home. And that's what a person with infertility, especially like from my experience or other people I've talked to, that's the support they're looking for. Is they don't need you there with them at the doctor's office. They don't need you there constantly.
Right.
They just want you to be able to walk behind them. And that's what the support they're looking for.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to come up with the things that people said or did, right? And, sometimes people say things out of a uncomfortableness that they feel, right? And so they say things that they think will either lend support or make them feel better in the scenario. And it doesn't mean that you need to take that on as yours.
No.
Sometimes the effort of trying to connect needs to be noted, right? Of even if it's not necessarily what you need in that moment, they're still making that effort to connect to you. And that I had a hard time seeing that for a while, right? It'd be like, why do you keep saying these like super unhelpful things?
Yeah.
And it was more of a
like advice, like why don't you try this?
Advice, or for some folks that are religious, right? It was more like, when the time is right, you will be given a baby.
That one, it grates me. Or how did they put it? Somebody says it, it'll happen when it happens.
It'll happen when it happens, or it'll happen when it's supposed to happen.
Yes.
Like,
As if it's not supposed to yet.
Right.
yeah, like I would really like to know when that magical time is supposed to occur.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so just
Decrease your stress. That's my other favorite one.
Yes.
decrease your stress as if that is going to not make you more stressful in that moment.
Right.
I don't know about you, but when somebody tells me to calm down when I'm feeling pretty upset, it usually works.
Oh, it totally.
Doesn't make me stabby at all.
Oh, no, I don't get spicy about it at all. One bit.
Sometimes people have good intentions.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
And it's poorly executed.
Yeah.
Right? And so finding ways that your validation in your journey isn't dependent on what other people say or do is a really important part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
And so, Sarah, when you said, going to your own therapist, that allows you time. That's an hour, let's say a week, that you get to go in and you get to range from the highest highs to the lowest lows.
Yeah.
And that time is dedicated for you.
Oh, yeah.
No type of you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
No type of you need to consider this or look at it this way or have you thought about X, Y, and Z, right? It's just it's a place to be raw.
Yes. Yes.
And
it
that is so important because when you are interacting with folks that don't understand or don't have that connection and they're trying to connect and they're maybe missing the mark.
Yep.
Like you have to be at a place where you're not going to lash out at them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Even if they didn't necessarily do it right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think something to remind yourself of if you have somebody in your life going through infertility issues or a journey, I like to call it a journey,
I like that.
is to do research. Like they the most exhausting thing as a person going through infertility is to have to explain what an HSG test is.
Yes.
And have to explain like all this other stuff. So if your friend identifies like, hey, you know, we are going through this, and maybe they give some upfront information like, hey, I have PCOS, which is, you know, currently my reason. And my friends are like, cool. And they Google it real quick. And they're like, now I understand. I understand what's going on.
That's good advice.
Yes.
That makes sense.
It can be really hard to be the one going through it and the one expected to educate others on it. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. And I would say too, of like, if you know someone that is going through infertility, just show up. There's no like magic thing that you need to say or do.
No.
You need to just be present. If it's, hey, here's a soft blanket or a specific like stuffed animal or a like one of the scent microwavable buddies, right? Because I mean,
they're lovely.
You need lots of heating pads as you go through this process. But like, even if it's just a thoughtful gift, right? It's something tangible that people can be reminded that people are thinking of you.
Yeah, exactly. Small gifts, just small things.
It's really the small things that add up.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
So I have a couple of questions for us. So I had posted and asked for like what's some advice that people want around this, and so I'm gonna pull it up because I feel like you two are experts in this realm. So I want to see what advice you would have over this. Okay.
Ready.
Okay. So first one. Last week I discovered that I require IVF treatment, and since I work with kids, I feel increasingly sad or triggered whenever I encounter pregnant individuals and young kids. It's draining me emotionally, and I'm thinking about taking time off of work. However, since IVF is a lengthy procedure, that would only be a temporary solution. Has anyone gone through a similar experience, and what did they do?
So it is lengthy. It can be lengthy, I can say, you know. And I think understanding, again, where you are in your journey, if you find that you're starting to get drained from your work, and it's something I'd recommend regardless if it's infertility or whatnot, but start maybe adding some adults to your caseload. Start taking a look at that. Maybe not spending a lot of time with your current, referring out maybe some members of your current caseload if you need to, but also join a consult group, consult, take the time. If you're just passionate about working with kids and like, that's your number one thing and that's all you want to do, make sure every day is something you do for self-care. There has to be some sort of self-care each day, whatever that might be.
And sometimes for folks, even though it's a constant reminder of the loss or the struggles that the therapist is experiencing, sometimes it can be very life-giving to be around kiddos too, right? Like, icing out kiddos maybe isn't going to be as helpful as you might think, because then you're not allowing yourself to even be in that world. So for some folks, that might need to be what occurs, and for some it's leaning into the fun sessions that you get to have, the sweet kiddos that you've learned to love in their own ways, and that can be a bridge through the journey too. So it doesn't necessarily need to be one or the other. It's just doing what's right for you.
Next one is hey guys, I'm looking for resources, book recommendations for a woman in her late to mid 40s who is struggling with fertility problems. She's my client. She and her spouse have reached a point where they're ready to give up, but they're considering one more attempt at IVF if they can afford it. Are there any books that you would recommend that could assist my client during this stage?
Okay, I have a bunch of book recommendations because I think they're
I'll link in the description. That's perfect.
So The Joy of Later Motherhood, for people over 35. They call it a geriatric pregnancy, which I hate that. But that is by Behinna George Wayne. I think I actually got. I'll have to look up the actual name because I think I wrote that wrong. But
I'll have the link in
Cool.
the description. So it'll be.
Thank you. I'm not obviously. I have the courage to be imperfect. Adlerians. And then, so another book, It Starts with the Egg. If you're looking for a more scientific book, and that's by Rebecca Fett. And it's super scientific, but it's also really nice because you're like going through the journey of what could happen. Fighting Infertility by Samantha Bush. That's a firsthand account. Kyle Bush is a race car driver.
Oh, yeah.
They talk all about their infertility journey and how they're trying to help others. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
In Freaking Fertility, which is by Melanie Dale, and it includes a husband aspect to it too. So a husband support, because there is, he doesn't talk about his, like, having male infertility is all about her, but there are male infertility books too, because it's not just female, there is male portion too. Queer Conception, The Complete Fertility Guide for Queer and Trans Parents to Be by Kristen Callie. So for people in the LGBTQ plus community, it's a great book for people to kind of read through and go over. And another one for the LGBTQ plus community is Baby Making for Everybody, and Family Building and Fertility for the LGBTQ plus and Sola Parents by Maria Goodman and Ray Rachlin.
Awesome.
Yes. So those are a couple book recommendations I would definitely have people read.
Thank you so much for being so prepared and bringing a book list. That's amazing.
Like, here's your list. Read these now.
That's perfect.
No, that's
I love
great.
it. Oh, that's so helpful. Any other last things that we feel like we haven't covered yet?
I think the only other thing that I would add is I have both adopted and biological children, right? And so one thing that when we made it known that we were going to adopt, people are like, oh, so you're just giving up now.
Oh.
And I was like, no, this, like, adopting was very much a choice.
Yeah.
Right? And then when I got pregnant after that, it was, oh, so you're going to have your own kids now. And I'm like, nope. She is just just as much my child as my biological children. It is very different, right? Because adoption is very different. But I love all of my kids and how they came and their journeys to get to us. Each of them has their own journey, right? And that is something that's very sacred and precious for each of them. Yeah. But they are all very much my children. And so if someone facing infertility decides to adopt, that's not somehow a second choice, right? Like, that is a very first choice.
It's also not the solution.
And it's not a solution either.
Right.
Like, adoption, Miranda and I both could talk for days on on adoption and the things that go into that. But just know that either someone choosing to not pursue fertility treatments, pursuing adoption, fostering, finding other ways to connect, isn't them giving up.
No, it's not.
And so assuming that is harmful to the person that you're assuming it
And the
about,
kids.
and the children.
Oh, yeah.
So just, I think, awareness surrounding that, and that comes from approaching things with curiosity.
Yes.
And so I guess that's my other piece as, we come to a close, is just approach it with curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
Help me understand.
Yeah.
And not expecting the person who's experiencing it to educate you.
Yeah.
But having ears to listen to their journey.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree. So thank you.
Thank you both so much for joining.
Yeah.
And talking about this super
having
important
us.
topic.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
so glad we
you.
could bring this into this month and just start this conversation, because this is something that so many therapists experience, so many friends, so many clients, so many loved ones. And so I hope that this episode was helpful for people, and just knowing how to navigate their own journeys and supporting the people that they care about. So
Thank you for having us.
yeah, awesome. See you next week.